We're certainly glad to be here this morning to honor really two recipients. And I must say that all the hard work that the club has done with the gala and the activities last fall with the fundraisers we had with the popcorn or the caramel corn and the roses and whatnot, plus other activities, really come together to allow us as a club to contribute to those activities in our community that add so much value to our lives and the things that Hudson stands for and so forth. So it's my pleasure this morning to bring forward two recipients that will receive funds from our foundation this morning to support their efforts and their work here in our community. And first I'd like to bring up Jim Sukes. Is Jim here over here? Thank you, Jim. Good to see you again. And we're going to present Jim with a grant of $500 for the Habitat for Humanity project that they're working on currently. So Jim, it's our pleasure to present you with this check.
Thank you very much.
And this letter. And I think we have, I don't know, Jim, James, do you have the camera there?
The camera doesn't lie.
Oh. There you go. All right, thank you. Again, thank you. Appreciate it. Jim, did you want to say, I'm sorry. It is a tradition that I overlooked here where a recipient would offer some commentary. So James, would you please do so?
Absolutely.
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
So the money that was donated today will be used to support the Hudson Coalition. The Hudson Coalition is a 11-member coalition that helps us build homes. They've been building homes for us for 21 years, and this will be the 26th house that they built for us. So the money will help with the construction costs. And I want to give a shout out to Tom Tobin, who's one of the members of the Hudson Coalition. He's been out there swinging hammers before, and so we want to thank everybody for the donation, and look forward to building our 26th house for the Hudson Coalition. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Jim. Appreciate that. And our second award today goes to an organization that is part of our meeting every week, and that's Hudson Cable Television. And certainly we could not have the reach we have into our community with the messaging that does occur here with the great presentations that do occur every week and get into our community without the help of HCTV, which has become a standard bearer in our community. So it's my pleasure this morning to bring forward Barbara Van Blarkum. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah, I'm sorry. Dan Gerbach. So if I could ask both of you to come back up here. We'd like to present HCTV with a grant of $1,200 for all of their efforts in supporting our community. So. Roseanne is coming back here with our check. See how quick that works?
Good to see you all this morning. Thanks for having us here. Let's see, I guess I'll start first by saying that we've had a 20-year relationship with Rotary. Back in the day, Frank Youngworth and I went to Regis Smith to ask for a presence on our channel from your club, and it's been very good 20 years, and it's wonderful for us to see the people that you bring in from the community and the region and share their presentation on the channel for the community. And with that note, we have changed the name of our television station to Hudson Community Television, and we got a grant also to create a new logo for the channel. And we are also updating the studio with a new set this year. The Hudson Players have been commissioned through grants to create a new stage set in our studio, and part of that will be what we are enhancing the set with your donation. I'd also like to introduce Dan Gerbrocht. He's been with us for 7 years. He started with us. He was in the service learning program, and he's been with us for 7 years as an employee and is now the operations manager, and I am the programming manager. So I hope to see you at the station sometime, and we look forward to certainly seeing you every week on the channel. Anything? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Barbara. Dave?
Thank you, Craig and Roseanne. Thank you, Jim, Barb, and Dan for being here this morning and for all of your work in our community and beyond. And not to forget, Barb is also a Hudson High graduate. So, so again, evidence of the work of our club and the support of our club throughout our community. James Field would like a few minutes to talk about another very important avenue for our service, Relay for Life. James.
Good morning, Rotarians.
Good morning.
I promise to keep it short, so we'll come back next week with a little more information. But just a reminder, Relay for Life is coming up. It's the Hudson Stowe Relay for Life. It's on June 10th, and it takes place in Stowe at the Stowe Glen Retirement Village. And what I'd love to do is get all our members signed up. So you can sign up online, but I also have these, and you don't have to donate when you sign up, although obviously it goes to a good cause. But I pre-filled out a bunch of forms, and for everyone who signs up or who has signed up, I will give you one of these bracelets that lights up. You can change the batteries, and it says Relay for Life. And to start that off, I think something which I know, because there's going to be a lot of night marching and activities, we'll start off with our. I know you'll be wearing that. And so, you know, just, you know, we've all been touched by cancer, and unfortunately for our club, we've had some members, such as Jimmy, that have succumbed to that disease. The idea of the entire relay is to hopefully someday not have any more relays, because they finally found a cure, but unfortunately that hasn't happened yet. So this money goes to a whole host of things. It goes towards research, it goes towards care, services that help inform people to prevent cancer. So there's a whole lot of benefits that come out of this. So your support is definitely appreciated. And actually, I forgot to mention with the Hudson Cable, I should also mention that you have so many wonderful shows and really interesting and fascinating, but if you do have a problem getting sleep at night, they also televise our school board meetings, so you could watch that. The beginning part of the meeting is really fun because we have educational purpose, but then towards the end, it's more the recitation of the phone book as we go through and approve all the stuff. So, but unlike their other shows, their other shows are really neat, and you learn a lot about Hudson, so I wanted to mention that. Anyway, thank you so much. I have these forms. All you gotta do is just fill out your name, email, just a couple things, and hand it to me, or you can go online. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And like I said, another important event, another opportunity for service from our club. Real quickly, again, the district event at Pioneer Water Park. Tickets are $20. I have them. You can also get them online through the District 6630 website. $20 for adults, $10 for children, includes food, drinks, games, admission to the park. And just one thing here to share real quickly. We received a thank you note from one of our scholarship winners from last week. I'd like to share it. Dear Rotary Club of Hudson, thank you for selecting me for the Rotary Club of Hudson Scholarship. It is greatly appreciated. I look forward to putting the scholarship to good use as I continue my education at The Ohio State University. With gratitude, Macy Laurie. So just thought that the club would like to be aware that we did receive that thank you note from Macy. And now, an important stepping stone, biomarker for members of our club, Joe Zapatowski. We have some Paul Harris Awards this morning.
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning. Boy, there sure is a call for our dollar, isn't there? And this is a call for your dollar also. This presentation of the Paul Harris Fellow Recognition is the Rotary Foundation's way of expressing its appreciation for a substantial contribution to its humanitarian and educational programs. It is named for our founder, Paul Harris, a Chicago lawyer who started Rotary International with 3 business associates in 1905. We move closer to a world of peace and goodwill today as James Hickney becomes a Paul Harris Fellow +1, and Catherine Sines and Craig Tallman become Paul Harris Fellows. Would the 3 of you come forward to the podium, please? Congratulations to all 3 of you. You join the 21 members of this Rotary Club who have achieved this distinction in the past. 18 of these are Paul Harris Fellows. 1 is a Paul Harris Fellow +1, another is a Paul Harris Fellow +2, and yet another is a Paul Harris Fellow +8. Their gifts to the International Foundation's educational and humanitarian I seem to have a problem with that word, humanitarian programs is a commitment to peace and a better life for people across the world whom these Paul Harris Fellows may never meet. This is truly a selfless action and so wonderfully honoring the Rotary 4-way test. Jim, Catherine, and Craig, it is because of gifts like yours that the Rotary International Foundation is able to carry out an array of programs that achieve beneficial changes to our world. Improved living conditions, increased food production, better education, wider availability of treatment for the sick and disabled, new channels for the flow of international understanding, and brighter hopes for peace. In becoming a Paul Harris Fellow, Catherine and Craig join a remarkable company of persons throughout the world, and Jim, as a Paul Harris Fellow +1, reaffirms his commitment to this remarkable company of individuals, all recognized for their devotion to the ideal of peace and understanding. It is the goal of Rotarians the world over, and one that Jim, Catherine, and Craig share. All Paul Harris Fellows present in the audience, please stand to welcome our awardees into the fellowship.
Thank you, John.
President Dave, your turn.
Thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure to present
Let me get these out of your way.
each of the new Paul Harris Fellow members and the Paul Harris Fellow +1 pin to these individuals. Jim?
Thank you. I'm going to watch this.
I'll just hand you yours.
Oh, chicken!
Good call.
I still want candy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, don't go away. I have a certificate to present to the new Paul Harris Fellows. Let me read the first. Is to Catherine Sines, is hereby named a Paul Harris Fellow in appreciation of tangible and significant assistance given for the furtherance of better understanding and friendly relations among peoples of the world, signed by the chair of Rotary International Foundation and by our president. Catherine?
Thank you, sir.
And to you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Jim, Craig, and Catherine, for your role and your efforts as new members of the Paul Harris Society. We have a gold badge presentation this morning, Evan McCauley, and while Evan is coming up with the recipient, I will note a couple of weeks ago, Bob Johnson was here as part of the club assembly, and I believe that contributions to the Paul Harris Society, it's like 92 cents or 94 cents out of every dollar goes directly to benefit humanitarian causes. That's a phenomenal number. If you get solicitation calls from paid solicitors on the phone, and I ask them, well, how much actually goes to the charity? And usually they think that they're, tremendous if they say, well, 20 cents goes to the charity. Yeah. So it's a really remarkable thing. Evan and Jim?
Good morning, fellow Rotarians. All right, so last time I talked with you, I mentioned that we're going to continue to have these types of ceremonies, and we're continuing to get new membership, and it's great. It's all thanks to you and the good work that you're doing. So this morning, we're here to highlight the great work that Jim Lang has done with our club. He's been a member now for quite a while. This presentation is a little bit delayed, if you will, but we're happy to do it this morning. Jim's done a great job getting integrated into the club. He's spent a lot of time working on the gala committee this year and sponsorships and advertisements. So his team did a great job, and hopefully he'll continue to support the gala committee in future years. Jim actually had been well versed with the gala and has been a contributor or a donor for many years as well. So last thing that I'll mention, then I'll give the podium over to Jim briefly here, is that I would highly encourage you, if you haven't spent a lot of time with Jim, give him a call. He's an awesome guy. He'd be happy to go out with you on a Friday after work and spend some time at Lucida's or, your other local favorite watering hole. But thanks for being with us, Jim. You're doing a great job. And again, I encourage you to reach out and spend some time with this amazing guy. Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you, sir. How do you put this on?
You gotta go inside.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Evan. And really, it's been a pleasure to be integrated into the club, and I've enjoyed being on the gala committee with Ron and Gail and my co-chairs for the sponsorship. It's just pretty nice. You don't have to, doesn't damage the shirt or anything. But yeah, and like Evan said, he's always at Lucida's with Warfield, so it's easy to find us there. But I know a lot of you, most of you already, so it's a pleasure to be a part of this great organization. I know more about it now since my Phil Warburton has introduced me. Always picked up all those donations, and now I know where they go, and it's a great cause. And unfortunately, you're going to have to find somebody else to get donations from now because I'm doing it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Evan. And it's good to have you as a member, Jim. Next up, today's speaker introduction, Jim Ahern.
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning. Before I introduce Sam Manier, who's a sports psychologist, I was thinking about the role that sports psychologists could play, or the role that the mind plays in sports. And the closest thing to sports lately was last Friday night. My wife and I agreed that the trip to Tionesta would be great. $1,200 is about the limit. Well, in the heat of battle, when people start donating, it goes beyond $1,200, $1,300, like $1,400. And I get a poke in the ribs, like, what are you doing? We said $1,200. So it ended up $2,000 because it's, your head's in the game and you want to, it's competition and you decided you want it, and there it goes. So I'm sure we've all had coaches say, it's attitude, man. It's all your attitude. Dr. Sam Manier is a performance psychologist and the founder of Center for Peak Performance. It's based in Hudson. He's worked with thousands of professional, Olympic, college, high school athletes, including the Cleveland Browns, Ohio State Buckeyes, Washington State Cougars, and currently the University of Akron Zips. He's also served as an executive coach for companies across the globe. He uses performance psychology and his extensive experience as a foundation to help individuals, teams, companies, and groups pursue their potential. Sam, the floor is all yours.
Good morning. Good morning. So I wanted to just show you a couple of recent clips that some of you may have seen. I did a quick search of some newspapers, and you're seeing a lot about psychology in sport and sports psychology and mindfulness, and whether it's the Cavs or the Bears or the Browns or the Indians or the Seahawks, the Mariners, the Mets you see up there. So certainly seems to be a growing field. So what I thought I'd do, I understand this is a sports-themed month, so share a little bit about what the heck sports psychology is and what we do, and I want to try to relate it a little bit to business, since figured that would help all of you as well. So, and then certainly happy to answer questions that I can, and hopefully no Maurice Claret or Johnny Manziel questions, but we'll see. Okay. So what is sports psychology? Really, I tried to break it down into 4 areas, and depending on your training, you may or may not be able to do all of these. But so one thing, probably the part that's kind of has the most attention, is the performance side of sports. So, I think we could all recognize that there is a psychological component in performance, whether it's your confidence or your motivation or your ability to focus, handle the pressure, whatever type of performance, whether you're a performing artist, whether you're an athlete, whether you're doing a presentation, whether you're about to terminate an employee, there is a psychological component, and we call that mental skills or mental toughness or peak performance or what have you. The other side that maybe a lot of people don't think about are the reverse. So how sport impacts people's lives, and not always in a good way. So unfortunately, you see, because of the pressure, because of the demands, starting to impact athletes' families, their lives, and themselves. So we know that athletes are at least as susceptible, if not more at risk, than non-athletes for mental health issues. So there we're talking about substance abuse, depression, anxiety, relationship difficulties, etc. It's become pretty big business to try to identify the next Johnny, so you don't draft him, or you do try to identify the next Tom Brady, so you do draft him, and with pretty limited success, I will tell you. But there is a big business out there on trying to profile athletes to identify who might fit into the culture. And again, you may have, I'm sure you've all come across pre-employment assessments in the corporate world, so it would be a similar process, and so with a lot more dollars behind it, of course. So all the professional sports will utilize psychologists and psychological tests to try to predict what's going to happen in the future. And then another area of sports psychology would be the impact of exercise, and how that plays out in young people and their confidence later in life, but also mitigating things like depression and other mental health issues. So when we talk about sports psychology, it's probably a little bit broader than maybe what you had in mind or what most people have in mind. So what's it look like? So I've had the good fortune of working with all of these populations. So professionally, I did work with the Cleveland Browns. I was there full time for 2 years, and did all of those things on the previous slide. So my role was to work with the athletes from a performance standpoint, to work with them from a counseling standpoint, helping them with their families, with issues that might be arising, doing pre-draft evaluations, and then trying to help integrate them once we did draft them. At the Olympic level, as you might imagine, training for one performance every 4 years. Quite a bit of pressure, quite a bit of politics involved as well in selecting some of these athletes. So it's not always an objective measure like who ran the fastest. So the Olympics, USOC has probably about 10 sports psychologists on staff throughout the United States working with different sports, again from a performance standpoint as well as from a clinical or counseling standpoint. At the collegiate level, most of the positions are part-time at this point, but there are probably about 20, 25 full-time psychologists employed by predominantly Division I athletics. The NCAA is really pushing for this trend to grow because they are really focused on the mental health of their student athletes, recognizing that they are an at-risk population. So starting to see more and more positions like this. And then high school and amateur athletes, whether you're just the weekend warrior or you are trying to win a state championship, again, as people are looking for some competitive advantage, sports psychology is something that they're gravitating to. I think probably about 10, 15 years ago it was strength and conditioning. You know, nobody had a strength coach on staff, and now there's teams of them, right? And I think that kind of the next thing is, as the playing field gets equalized, is sports psychology. I know you have a speaker. I did look at your speaker list coming up that's going to talk about heroin and opiates. Am I correct in that next month? So I don't want to go too in depth into this, but I wanted to, you know, when just to plant a seed for when that speaker does come. We do know that high school athletes are an at-risk population for heroin because of the nature of sport and painkillers being prescribed, and heroin being much, much, much more inexpensive. They are an at-risk population. We also know that high school athletes are more likely to abuse painkillers for a high as opposed to using it for pain management. So I'm just planting that seed, and perhaps it could come back up then when your speaker's here in June. A little history of sports psychology for your history buffs. 1898 was really the first quote-unquote sports psychology experiment. Norman Triplett studied what happens when people can see your output on a stationary bike. And, you know, it's not rocket science, right? People tried harder when people could see their effort, as opposed to if their effort was pooled and averaged across a group, people didn't work as hard. And so I actually went to my first spinning class ever. I got dragged to one, and they actually post your stats up on the big screen, and it's utilizing basically this research from 1898. Your name is up there and your output is up there, and there was dead last in the class and getting smoked by people, and it made me go faster. In the 20s in Europe, the first sports psychology labs were put into place. Coleman Griffith is considered the father of American sports psychology. So he wrote 2 coaching books in the 20s, and then in 1938 was hired by the Chicago Cubs to consult with them. Unfortunately, it took them until last year to win it. But I had to get my jab in there somehow. So during 46 to 89, there was a growth in sports psychology in Eastern Europe. And if you're a history buff, you know what was going on. We had the Cold War going on, and the Olympics were very, very important. So besides steroids and other drugs that the Eastern European countries were trying with their Olympic athletes, they were also using sports psychology techniques. Didn't really see much going on in the U.S., and it wasn't until the 1980s where sports psychology started to become more prevalent in athletics, and even more recently in the military. So again, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what I do with athletes from a performance standpoint and how it might apply to all of you in the business world as well. I have a sarcastic sense of humor, and apparently some of you do not, but that's okay. But this is not what I do. So when I work with an athlete, when I work with an executive, I really believe that there's 3 phases. So the first is you have to develop some insight, and insight isn't enough, but it's a starting point. So you have to know, like, what are the conditions that that exist that help me perform at my best? What are the conditions that lead to me performing poorly? And you're going to notice, if you take some time and reflect and compare notes with your fellow Rotarians, is that everybody's different. So I might do better with one set of circumstances, and Joe here might do better in a different set of circumstances. And so really phase 1 is just to figure out, what does that look like? And you might do that by journaling, by just reflecting, by going back and visualizing some past good performances or bad performances. The next phase is learning to self-monitor. And that's, all right, so I know what a good performance looks like and what the conditions are, and I know what a bad one looks like. Now I need to know, where am I right now relative to that? So it's maybe monitoring your heart rate or monitoring your mood or your emotions. And again, you can do that by journaling. You can do that by charting. So how energized was I? How pleasant was my mood, etc. And then you get into the fun stuff, and that's the interventions. And so that might be goal setting, that might be visualization, that might be concentration training, that might be relaxation techniques. But that's just the mental side. So certainly we don't want to discount the physical, the technical, and the tactical as well. So there are really 4 components to performance. I only work with the last one up there, the mental side. So I know many of you are golfers, and so I thought you might be able to relate to this. I've seen some of you golf too. So first, some misunderstandings. Just because you fail at a presentation, you forget your speech, just because you fail on that first tee when everybody's watching you, doesn't mean that you've choked. Choking and panicking are very different. What we know from doing MRIs of brains of athletes are that choking happens when you are thinking too much, and panicking happens when you stop thinking completely. They look the same to the observer, but what's going on in your brain are quite different. We know that no matter what, it is a myth that some people perform better under pressure. Okay, over time, everybody performs worse under pressure. So what do I mean by that? If you're shooting free throws in your driveway with nobody around you, with no consequence, you may be you're an 80% free throw shooter. Okay, but as soon as you put, you know what, $5 on the line, or you have people watching you, everybody's performance will go down over time. Now, in 1 or 2 free throws, sure, you might be in the rhythm, but we even know this happens to cockroaches. It's an interesting study. They had cockroaches in an observer box. So they had friend cockroaches watching other cockroaches go through a maze. And when you introduced other cockroaches watching that cockroach, it took longer for the cockroach to get through the maze. Yes, they do survive no matter what. You can't kill the cockroach, can you? Those who are viewed as clutch, or seem to come through in the clutch, because we remember the clutch times and not the bad times, what they've done is they've found a way to mitigate the pressure. And their chance of success is at least close to or equal to what they would be able to do without pressure. Those are your true clutch performers. and most of you don't have something to write with, so I'll skip this demonstration. But a demonstration that I typically do is I have people sign their name, and then I have them put another piece of paper over top of it, and I say, okay, I want you to trace it and imagine that you have $1 million on the line for who comes up with the best tracing. Which signature do you think looks better? The first one. It's more fluid, it's more natural. And the second one is less fluid. People are usually holding the pen down a little tighter. It's thicker, it's darker, it looks choppy. And so the first lesson is never trace a signature if you have to forge it, okay? The second lesson is that you perform a lot better at a task that is habit when you don't think. Okay? When you're first learning a task, your prefrontal cortex is engaged, and that is very logical. It's step by step by step by step. When you first learn how to drive a car, tie your shoes, brush your teeth, walk, step by step by step. Once it becomes automated, it gets stored way back here, a different part of your brain. And that part of the brain is not real conscious thought. It just kind of goes. It's on autopilot. And what happens under pressure is we're taking things that are back here and we're bringing them up to here, and we're thinking about things we already know how to do. So some examples of choking in sports. You sports fans might remember some of these. There's Greg Norman. There's one of my favorites, John Vandeveld in the British Open. Phil, poor Phil. Little Bill Buckner. Anybody remember this one? Steve Sachs. Chuck Knobloch, famous one against the Indians. There's Rick Ankiel. He had to end his career because he couldn't get over the plate. I skipped Steve Blass. Still, unfortunately, choking in baseball is referred to as the Steve Blass disease. You know, and Minnesota's kicker here missing a 20-something yarder chip shot field goal cost his team the playoffs. So lots of examples. Sports is a great example to talk about choking under pressure. So I talked a little bit about this. I'm going to just kind of, in the interest of time, skip through this. But a little quote there from an archer. Your conscious mind always wants to help you, but usually it messes you up. So again, conscious mind would be up here. So what do I do with athletes that choke? So here are some potential interventions, and I think this may help you as well in the business world. And I'll go through these really briefly. So routines, and I know Mrs. Hargrove is coming as well soon, correct? Next week. All right, good. So had to put Mike up here. I'm sure you all remember the human rain delay, right? So he had the most intricate and detailed and amazing pre-hit routine, basically, and he had to go through it every single pitch, just ad nauseum. And thanks to Mr. Hargrove, we have new rules in place and so forth that you can't do this anymore, right? But back when Tiger was in his prime, people asked him, like, what are you thinking about when you make these shots? And he basically said, nothing. My mind's blank. I go through the same routine before every shot, and my brain turns off. I don't even remember the shot sometimes. And I'm sure you've all been in the zone like this before. Perhaps when you're driving, and before you know it, you've gone 30 minutes, and you can't remember. You can't remember what song was playing. You're like, oh my goodness. And you notice you almost always snap to it just before the exit. Okay? Because you're not asleep. You are aware. It's just you're on autopilot. You don't have to think how to drive. You just let your body know how to do it. Okay? Because of routines. I'm sure you've also started to drive a certain way, maybe a way that you go to work every single day, but today you're not going to work. maybe it's a Saturday, and you find yourself making the wrong turn or ending up in your work parking lot, and you're like, what the heck? I almost did it today. I was, on Wednesdays, I go to the University of Akron, and I had to come this way, and I almost turned the wrong way out of my neighborhood just because I'm on autopilot, because of the routine. So routines serve as a trigger or a cue for your brain to turn off and to go on autopilot. So before a performance, it's really important that you have a consistent routine that you go through. If you're up here and you have to give a talk and you get really nervous about that, develop some sort of routine, whether it's taking a couple of deep breaths or saying something to yourself, or if you want to be like Mike, you can, do this, but whatever. But you want to have a consistent routine that you always pair with that performance. And that's something that you see a lot of athletes do. Self-talk. So don't directions, usually not really effective. Okay, when I became a sports psychologist, my dad said, all right, hotshot, help me with my golf game. And I said, all right, what's the matter, Dad? He goes, I could be 10 feet or 100 yards away from water. It could be a creek. It could be a pond. The ball goes in every time. I said, all right, let's go. So I grew up in Menor, and so we went to the Blackbrook golf course, if any of you have ever played it, and the second hole has a little creek, okay, and it should be your second shot where it's in play. For my dad, it might have been his third, and he was, I think, 15 feet from the creek, and it's a little chip shot, approach shot onto the green. Probably should have been a pitching wedge or something, and he looks at the ball. He looks at the water, looks at the ball, looks at the water. He picks his ball up, puts it in his bag, and gets out this really nasty-looking, muddy ball. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? He said, I'm getting my water ball out. And I was like, oh, boy. So routine was different, right? He had a routine for the water shot and a routine for his regular shot. So then, lo and behold, lifts his head, tops that ball, rolls 15 feet, right in the creek. And I said, Dad, what were you thinking? He said, don't hit it in the water. Okay. So the way our brain processes don't directions is it pictures what the target, which is going in the water, and then the brain says, now do the opposite of that. That's not real effective communication, is it? I mean, I could miss the ball, didn't hit it in the water. I could hit it out of bounds right or out of bounds left. I didn't hit it in the water. And the last thing your mind pictures is ball going in the water. So for a lot of reasons, don't directions, not very good. So sometimes when it comes to athletes or executives, it's examining the things they're saying to themselves and trying to be a little clearer or a little bit more positive. If you need some help with your golf game, one or two things is all that should be in your head when you're swinging, because any more than that, and you're going to engage as part of your brain. Having some problems here. There we go. Reframing. Anybody? What do you see here? Everybody sees the old lady. Okay, here's her chin. Here's her mouth, nose. She's looking down. She's got a scarf over her head. Anybody see a young woman? Yes. See the young woman too? Okay. Here's her she's got a cute little nose, not like the old woman here. Cute little nose, eyelash. She's looking through the screen. This is a choker around her neck. Here's her ears. Okay. Here's an easier one. What do you see here? Two faces. Anybody see something different? A vase. Okay. Now, here's the thing. You can flip-flop from one to the other really quickly. But at the exact same time, if you're really focused on one, the rest kind of fades away. Okay, if you remember from Intro to Psych, this is called figure and ground. But my point is that when I work with athletes and executives, it's about how do you reframe it. So you're seeing it like the vase. Let's look at it a different way. Let's look at it like two faces. For example, imagine if you just won the lottery. You'd be pretty excited, I would think, right? So you can donate all that money to Rotary, right? And so what might be happening physiologically to you if you just got a call or you just looked at your numbers and you just saw that you just hit the Mega Millions? Endorphins would be kicking in, so your heart rate would be beating faster, you'd be breathing a little bit faster, okay? Might be perspiring a little bit. Okay, maybe your palms, forehead, armpits. Okay, some butterflies in your stomach. Okay? Now think about something that makes you really nervous. Public speaking, having to fire somebody, whatever that might be. And what do you notice if you think about how you feel physiologically in that situation? It's the same. Your heart's beating faster, you're breathing faster, you got uneasy feeling in your stomach, you're sweating. We know by researching fear and excitement, they're the same emotion. We just label one as positive and one as negative. So sometimes we'll have people say, just tell yourself you're excited. You're not lying. You're not lying to yourself. Tell yourself you're excited. And sometimes that is enough for them to perform better, instead of telling themselves, oh my goodness, I'm scared to death. Lots of relaxation techniques that are out there that can be effective in helping people perform under pressure, whether it's learning to breathe slower or through your diaphragm, visualizing, trying to focus in on a dot or a spot in the room. Progressive muscle relaxation is just alternating, contracting, and relaxing different parts of your muscles. Biofeedback, it was really popular in the 60s and 70s, but still a very effective tool today, is teaching people how to control and relax their muscles. And then what's becoming really popular in athletics as well as business right now is mindfulness. And it's a form of meditation where you're completely focused in the present. And there are some great apps out there for phones and iPads and tablets as well for that. Lastly, imagery or visualization. Maybe. There we go. So people can use imagery before a competition to help them prepare. They can use it during a performance to help them put them in the right mindset, and they can use it after a performance to replay. Interestingly, when you ask athletes how do you use imagery, they'll use it before and after a competition. When you ask executives when to use imagery, well, many executives will visualize their presentation or their pitch prior to, but very few use it after a performance to kind of go back and assess. And so if I were to plant a seed in there as well, I would say, don't just sit there and visualize it to help you prepare. Go back and replay it and figure out what you did well as what you could improve upon. So my contact info is up here. If anybody has any additional questions that you'd like to, feel free to email me, go to my website, call me. If you're on Twitter, you can tweet at me. And then I don't know, how are we on time? Do we have time for questions? A couple questions? Okay. Yes. Always have a backup, right?
Sorry about that. How do you integrate sports psychology, your tasks with the repetitive concussion issues?
It's a great question. So what we're learning, and we're still learning when it comes to concussions, but we're learning now that there's a large anxiety component in concussions, and a lot of it is, and unfortunately my 10-year-old just went through this himself. So he went through a concussion, he got tripped at school on the playground and plays soccer, and now every time he hits his head, he thinks it's a concussion, and it's hard to play soccer without hitting your head. So we know that there's an anxiety component, and so, for example, at the Cleveland Browns as well as at the University of Akron, where I do work 2 days a week now, all injured athletes, including those who are concussed, have a required meeting with me for me to evaluate them, teach them some stress management, and to make a connection so that should they be experiencing some psychological side effects, that they're able to reach out to me. But we do know, like I said, there's a large anxiety component, and sometimes that is prescribing some anti-anxiety meds on a short-term basis. Sometimes it's teaching stress management techniques. Sometimes and it may just be to help them fall asleep. But we're certainly still learning, but there is a large component from the psychological side for sure.
So the age-old question about coaching, and So you have two styles, the
Bobby Knights and the
Right.
Phil Jacksons.
yeah. So and those of us associated with the school system think about this all the time
Yeah.
because usually you get a lot of callbacks about the coaches who are more the Bobby Knight style. And my own personal observation, also at college, where I had a coach who was more the leadership as opposed to the whip
Mhm.
type of coach, was very successful and had Olympic athletes. So any review on if one tends to be more successful than the other?
Yeah, so there's really no doubt that the positive approach is much more successful. The John Wooden's, so for every time somebody wants to point out a Bobby Knight, I'll point to John Wooden, and I'd take John Wooden any day. But there's a lot of confounding factors. So Bobby Knight had a lot of talented players. Certainly, you can in the short term motivate people. I know it was Hollywoodized, but if you look at the Herb Brooks story with the Miracle on Ice, right? So trying to rally that team to hate him and bring them together. It's just a very slippery slope, and it's a dangerous thing, and quite often does not turn out in the long term to be a good approach. It also depends on the people you have and how resilient they are and what they've been through themselves, and what are they able to reframe it and pick and throw away the way it was delivered, but hold on to the core message of what he was trying to say. And that just takes a certain type of person. So with the right people, yes, you could probably be successful if you're the yeller and the screamer, but the ratio the research shows is about 4 or 5 positive comments to 1 critical is really the magic formula.
Hi, Sam. Okay, so my question, I'm curious, are you working mainly with the golfer that has a choking problem, or are you working with the business owner that's kind of trying to grow their business and develop a process? Basically, we're all in this room tied to athletes. We participate in athletics. We know business owners. We are business owners. When should you be talking with somebody that you might be able to help out?
Yeah, so I work with people really at all phases, but quite honestly, when it comes to an athlete, it takes a special person to reach out proactively. So probably 80% of the time, I've just bought 6 new drivers and they're all in my attic right now, and whatever, so they've tried everything else. So it's kind of like a last resort type of thing. It also costs money, right? So let's be honest. So if you can try to work through it on your own, you're going to do that. Maybe you pick up a book first, and if you're a golfer, one of Bob Rotella's books, they're all fantastic, and that might be helpful. So when it comes to an athlete, I do have some athletes that are performing, they might be at the top of their game, but they know they have the potential to do more. And again, it's a real special athlete. They're probably the most fun to work with, that will come out proactively and say, look, I'm at the top of my game physically, technically, and tactically, but mentally I think there's so much more I could do. And so I want to work with you. But a lot of the times with an athlete, it's when they're in a slump or they're not performing well. The business owners are a little bit different. I mean, yes, there's the problem situations, and I don't like to get into executive coaching when it's last resort, you either fix this or you're gone. That's not my type of situation that I like, because then I get associated with the hatchet, like, oh, here comes Sam again. It's, this person's going to get fired. So I tend to work more with people, again, who are performing well, but have maybe people have seen potential in them, leadership potential. Maybe they're a new leader. Maybe they're in a new role. Maybe it's a new position. And, that there's just some untapped potential. That's just my preference. Certainly there are coaches out there that would work with people who are more problem focused. So, if I were to say the majority of my athletes it's more because they're in a slump, whereas the more of the executives I work with, it's more because they see the potential.
Thank you, Dr. Manier. Very, very interesting presentation on a topic that we all hear a lot about. I'd like to thank everybody who helped with the AV today. Den Rich, always available at a moment's notice. We appreciate that. Tom Page, Tom Tobin, James Field, and Ron Barnhouse. Today's Rotobuck, the payout is $15 and the jackpot is $202. Last four are 9592. 9592. Ah, Phil. Good luck. No winner today. Reminder, next week, Sharon Hargrove will be here with us. A couple of thoughts that seem to me appropriate as we come after Friday's gala. The first, do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And lastly, the only ones among you who will really be happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Albert Schweitzer. See everybody next week. Have a great week.